That's good. All right. I bought another camera. Let's talk about it before my wife gets home. You film photographers know what this means. I have a great excuse, I promise. Let's dive into the world of 120 film. This guy. This is the Pentax 645. I snagged this Pentax 645 off Aldo at Film Fridge Mag. But first, it sounded good. So let's get into it. I'm going to try to make this. I wanted something to edit in my travels. So let's back up a bit. As of January 2024, I decided to document all of my wedding bookings strictly on film. I wanted to phase out digital photography in my weddings and also challenge myself artistically and force myself to slow down. Film photography does just that. I always told myself I have 35mm film down, so why would I even bother with 120? Aldo happened to be selling a Pentax 645 with a 35mm lens, and boom, this was my sign. And then it clicked. Why don't I dive into 120 film? I've been loving it so far. Obviously, a huge learning curve coming from 35mm film. The Pentax 645 only comes with 15 shots, whereas I'm used to 36 shots with the 35mm format, as well as the whole winding from one spool to the next. That was a little weird at first. I mean, it makes sense in theory, but it's just odd how 35mm winds on the sprocket and then rolls back into the canister, whereas the 120 rolls from one spool to a completely different spool. It's just kind of interesting. A big sexy selling point for this camera is the sound of the shutter. I mean, listen to this thing. It's what mechanical dreams are made of. I've shot a handful of rolls at this point, mostly Portra 400 and 800 basic, I know, but I wanted to get a couple rolls in the bank before I made a video about this camera. That way I could actually talk about it and have a good experience and good handle on this camera. The lens is a 35mm, which has been very refreshing for me. None of my other focal lengths, whether digital or 35mm film, do I shoot at the focal length of 35mm. So this has been a really refreshing take on things and perspective. So I've really been enjoying a little bit wider focal length. This thing has a 120 back, which when I bought the camera, it had a 220 back. It did take 120 film fine, but over time, I read on Reddit that the motor would eventually burn out because the 120 film paper is thicker than a 220 film. So jumped on KEH and bought a 120 back for this, so I wouldn't run into that issue down the road. Grip here also takes 6 AA batteries, which is pretty hefty. It's more batteries than any other camera I've ever shot with. Ergonomically, this fits really, really well in my hand. It's got a solid square build. There's not much to it. It's pretty straightforward. The helpful dials on top with your ISO, mode, LED button, and your exposure compensation. You could also adjust the shutter with the up and down arrow. The light meter does still work in this, which has been absolutely game changer to be able to see where my light meter is in this camera, since I don't use a stationary light meter. That's pretty much it for this video. I wanted to get a couple of rolls in the bank before I made any sort of video. I picked up this camera. I am really pleased with everything I've gotten back so far. I am in love with the 35mm lens I have for it. I don't plan on getting any other lenses at this point. I'm fully content with this for the however long future. Do you shoot 120? What camera do you have? Let me know down in the comments. And I gotta go catch a flight. As always, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.